But how many moms out there are struggling with mom guilt? Is there a scientific basis to mom guilt? Mom guilt starts, I think, from in utero, and it continues indefinitely. So excited to have everyone back today from wherever you're watching us from. We are so excited that you have joined us today. We have a special conversation and we have a special guest on the panelist today. Oh yes, coming to us as the founder, owner of Grace Lamp Wellness. We have Francia Telesford on the panel today, but that's not all. She got many titles. So let me share with you what Francia does. So Francia is joining us today as an ASW. She is also a perinatal mental health certified therapist. Okay, so we're going to talk about everything today.
Thank you for having me.
We are going to talk about all that today because we have an important topic and we had to get Francia on the couch to talk about this topic today. Okay, we have a special holiday coming up. We celebrate moms every single year, but how many moms out there are struggling with mom guilt? We hear it all the time. I know you guys have heard about it. It starts literally, mom guilt starts, I think, from in utero, but the ladies are going to check me on that. And it continues indefinitely. Absolutely indefinitely. And mom guilt is something that is specific only to moms in the sense that we never really talk about dad guilt, or perhaps dads don't have guilt. We'll talk about it. Why do women experience such guilt when it comes to child rearing and the decision makings that we have to do from day to day? So, Francie, I'm going to share your story. Right, we almost had to make a few changes with today's panelists because Francia was experiencing some mom guilt. Am I correct in expressing that?
Oh, yes.
She's like, where will you go with this?
No. And I was like, which time? Which time?
Which time, right? So
Yeah.
explain on a day-to-day what that experience of what that decision making is like.
Oh my goodness. It varies. I mean, if I can use today as an example. So I was experiencing some mom guilt because there was a bunch of things that came up for both of my daughters. And I had already had this scheduled. And so I was like, oh my gosh, how am I gonna? So my oldest daughter, she was supposed to have a track meet today. And then my youngest had gymnastics. So trying to figure out, okay, so do I cancel this? Like, how do I do what I want to do and let them do what they need to do? And so went back and forth with my husband, and the plan was just for, to get to the track meet and then we'd switch off and then I would just take this meeting in my car. And then it turns out that the track meet was canceled. So I was able to, not have to be in a vehicle. But I mean, stuff like that happens all the time where you just, you want to do things for yourself that are important. But then also there's the nurturing side of you that fights against like, okay, what if I considered like, okay, what if I miss this track meet? Am I a bad mom? I could just let my husband take care of it all. And then I'm missing it, even though it's to encourage in motherhood, but then, okay, I'm being a bad mom by missing this meet here, so those are all the thought processes that go on. And, I'll encourage other moms to, not have the mom guilt, but then when it's your own stuff, it's hard to, that's like the automatic thought that kind of occurs, you feel like somehow you can't be everywhere at once. You're disappointing. You're not able to give like 100 to anything, it feels like sometimes.
That's an you brought up so many interesting things that I want to dive into, but I'm going to start here. When was the first time that you realized that you had experienced what we term mom guilt? And then help us understand what exactly is mom guilt.
Ooh, the first time, I mean, I think maybe one of the first times I can remember is just probably just giving birth, like becoming a mom. Because you're a mom when you're pregnant, but when the baby actually got here and then went to breastfeeding class to learn how to breastfeed and all of that. and then I was having latching issues. And so immediately society teaches you like, oh, you're supposed to know how to be a mom. Like immediately. You're
Mm-hmm.
supposed to know how to breastfeed, you're supposed to know how to do everything. And I'm like, I took the class. Like, come on, what's happening here?
Right, right.
And
Where is
you
that
know,
automatic switch, right?
yeah, and then, the nurses and doctors are coming in doing their job and then letting us know like, hey, if the baby loses a certain amount of weight, that's an issue. And I'm like, okay, well, I have all this milk. She won't latch properly. Okay, so I have to get this milk out of here or else I'm a bad mom, stuff like that. So there's messages that happen along the way where there's a sense of like, oh, you should know how to do this, right? Like this is innate. Like, and so when moms have problems, um, there's that sense of like failure.
Mm. So mom guilt is wrapped, or it includes a sense of failure when it comes to being to motherhood or being a mom. It sounds like that's really what. So the choices when you're making help, I'm trying to understand, y'all. School me on this. So when you're making those choices, you're making those choices from the perspective of which decision making
Hmm.
reflects bad motherhood.
I when I think of it, it's not even, well, maybe it is. I and I guess this is how my mom guilt will come in. It makes me think of what are going to be the longer term effects. If I don't do this, am I more scarring my child, or is it something that's like bypassable? Like like you said, like thinking about like not going to the meet, is this going to be having such a major negative effect on the child that it's better for me to just sacrifice whatever I want to do, need to do, and just
Mhm.
take care of what they want or what they need.
Yeah.
That's the way I look at it the most. Like, that's the way I think for me it shows up. I would not even necessarily think of the term necessarily bad mom, but I think
Mhm.
about, um, am I damaging my child by doing
But
this
isn't that the
or
same
not
thing?
doing
Like
it? Well, I mean,
it ultimately, like it's always the choices between something that you are causing negative to with the child, which is what some people term as bad motherhood,
right.
bad
I
mom.
just never, I don't think I've ever,
Yeah.
I mean, there are times that I felt like, oh, I'm being a bad mom. Like, or I'm being a different mom. Like,
Hmm.
I've prided myself on, as a health clinician, I want to make sure that my son uses all the correct terms when he's talking about the body parts, right? So he
You
learns
are
every
such a clinician.
he learns everything the clinical way,
That's
Oh,
except
important.
mhm.
had to rebel. And so he calls breasts boobs. And I've taught him boobs from the day he was he could make a sound. I'm like, nope, this is my bad mom moment. Like, but to me, it's more like silly, funny bad mom. Like the other stuff, I don't think about it as being a bad mom. I think about more like devastation. Like to me, bad mom is like, okay, pat on the hand. You did something
Oh,
really
you're thinking major. You like like Francia's thinking like a little tremble. You're thinking
earthquake, shatter,
exactly
tornado,
Oh,
like
like
that.
6.8, 7.9,
Am I gonna
complete
have to have admin
earthquake.
therapy the rest of his days because of this decision that I'm making here? So I
So
think I should go extreme.
I think that happens though. Like it'll start small and then it's like
uh
it's one little thing. It's like, okay, yeah, then they're gonna have some type of anxiety, some type of problem, and
Right,
it's gonna be because of me. And
right,
it just spirals, right? Yeah.
right.
so ladies, where does this come from? Because we didn't, all of a sudden we weren't necessarily born this way where we have this innate guilt when it comes to motherhood, or perhaps we do. Is there a scientific basis to mom guilt, or is this something that is part of culture? Where is it coming from?
Well, I'll give a little bit of my perspective. It comes from different places. I mean, I feel like it is cultural and it is
Mhm.
societal, but um, it is genetic as well, and it has to do kind of with your family also. So, a lot of mom guilt shows up, for myself, an example, and also with some of my clients
Mm-hmm.
based on their relationship with their primary caregivers. So whether they were lacking something, in their parenting. So like there's a lot of we call it, mother wound, right? So
Mm-hmm.
where there's
Oh.
some type of trauma that's happened with, your own parent, and so you're
Mm-hmm.
trying to be the opposite of that,
Mm-hmm.
so whatever it is that perhaps you didn't get, right? So then it kind of puts you to the full opposite spectrum. Like, okay, so let's say like you had food insecurity, right? So if for some reason you have trouble breastfeeding, it's like, oh no, now I'm, turning out to damage my child somehow based on some type of
Oh.
trauma that I had. You know
Mm-hmm.
what I mean? So I hear that a lot from moms. My mom didn't give me this, and so I want to make sure that I'm offering this. And then I'll hear them talking and I see that they're offering it, but they feel like they're not, that they need to go now to 100. Um,
Mm.
and not realizing that, there's no perfect mom. There's the term good enough mother, right? Good enough
Mm-hmm.
parent.
Mm-hmm.
And but yet there's still this sense of like, no, I have to, do everything, be everything. You know what I mean?
And that correlation with trauma is really deep because I feel like whether it is neglect or whether it's poverty or whether it's some other form of violent trauma, that somehow it kind of seeps into so many aspects of our character. So it's so interesting that you made that connection. That totally makes sense to me. One would argue or bring up the point that a lot of men experience similar experiences growing up, right? They have similar nurturing. They may have been neglected. They may have grown up in poverty. Why don't we hear about dad guilt? Or do men just not talk about it? Does dad guilt actually exist?
I think it does, but to a different extent. And it may be called something different. So maybe I'll just use the example like if, for postpartum depression, there's a 50% chance that men will have postpartum depression if the woman does. And so people don't tend to pay attention to that. And then also just the way that men tend to relay information, it's a little bit different. So, or wait, the way they express. So maybe their postpartum may come out as, being short-tempered or something like that. And people won't associate that with, oh, they feel guilty that they're not being a good enough dad based on, whatever experience that they're trying to avoid, et cetera. So, I mean, I've never been asked that question. I think there is some level of dad guilt, but I feel like men don't talk about it as often. And also, society, I feel like, puts a little bit less pressure on men to show up in fatherhood. There's lots of men that show up in fatherhood, but for example, if you see a gentleman, outside walking, his stroller with his baby and everything, like, oh wow, like what a great dad. You see the mom, it's just normal. No one's like,
Right.
oh, what a great mom. It's just like, yeah, you're supposed to be doing that.
Mm.
So there's this sense of like what um what our titles and our roles should be, you know what I mean? And so I think we kind of take that on without really realizing like how much society is kind of impacting us in that way.
You are both I think one of the biggest struggles that I hear often has to do with balancing a work life and having kids. And I do believe that this is probably one of the amplifiers of mom guilt. How do you guys balance and how do you deal with mom guilt when it comes to your careers? Because you're both career women. So how does that balance happen? What do you say to yourself um, when you go out that door every morning or you wake up and you start your business for the day? How do you balance that mom guilt that shows up?
That rent need to be paid. Them bills are waiting. I still want to buy him them cleats that he wants or something along those lines. So it still kind of revolves around him any which way.
Mm,
Knowing to put it in the perspective of these things have to be done. But I will say, I can acknowledge that there are probably more things that I would do um, if I were not a mom. Um,
mm,
I'd probably be doing a whole lot more research and looking up different things that, taking more classes to learn more. Like, there's probably a whole lot of that I would do that would be great and beneficial to my patients and great and beneficial to my careers. But at this point in time, the priority has changed just a tad bit. For where I am, I can do my job well. I can always do better in anything. I
Mm-hmm.
can always do better, but I can do my job well, and I can put some of that mental energy on focusing on and rearing this child, because the biggest thing about it is that there is just a short period of time to make that kind of change. And I think that eggs on the mom
Mm-hmm.
guilt even more, because
Mm-hmm.
it's finite. Like, and I mean, don't get me wrong, it's not like, if you don't develop a great bond with them now, you'll never have a great bond with the kids. I don't necessarily believe that, but I do believe that it would be easier if I can develop that really good relationship in these stages, and then as he grows, it changes, but hopefully never get to the point where I'm like, oh, I haven't spoken to my son in a year, you know what I mean, or one of these.
Mm-hmm.
But my career can always come back to it. I don't think it changes. I don't think it's going to go anywhere, but he will. So he becomes a priority right now. And so that is the way that I tend to kind of wrap it up, because I know that I still need to do these things for him. And one
Mm-hmm.
of the specific things in my case, so initially how I started working was 10-hour shifts, 4 days a week to get the 40 hours. And I'm managing to change my schedule because, great, I had a day off. Yes, perfect, fine, lovely. I would have no involvement in his after school activities if I kept that kind of schedule. I
Mm-hmm.
would not see him except to put him to sleep every night. And that became very much unacceptable to me. And so, yes, career, yes, pushing forward, but we have to find a way to balance it. And thankfully, I have the type of work environment where they work hard to help me learn to balance it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think was something that Francia said earlier when you were sharing your decision making for today, and trying to figure out how to balance, your motherhood duties, and also your sort of your personal development or personal career moves and personal activities. What I think is sometimes also undervalued is the modeling, right? So part of my assumption is part of motherhood is modeling for your kids what it's like to be a career woman, what it's like to pursue things that are part of your personal development, and their ability to see you accomplish those things also helps in their rearing, and they're, especially when you're raising Black girls and Black boys in a society that is so challenging for us. I think even the practical learning, as they call it, practical living learning tips, is just as important as being there for their events and being there for their matches. So I think sometimes we undervalue as a society the value of kids watching women do what we do. There's so many things that women can learn, that kids can learn from women, because we do a lot. And we do it well,
Yeah.
and we have this beautiful balance of this nurturer, and then they call it masculine energy, feminine energy. I'm gonna cop those words, but we have this beautiful balance, especially when we are career women. We have this innate nurturing that's a part of us, but then at the same time are able to be the boss lady. And sometimes, they get to see the nurturer, but they don't get to see the boss lady as much. And both aspects of womanhood is equally important and equally valued. How, if I were a new mom, how would I identify that what I'm experiencing is mom guilt? Like, what are the signs that you are having mom guilt?
Um, I would say, I mean, I think I agree with both of you in terms of, trying to find a balance, because it is very important to, have your children see both sides, that it's important to work and, all the different things that a mom is. But I would say maybe one of the first signs of, just having mom guilt is just a sense of feeling not good enough, that even though you did, A, B, C, D, A, A1, A2, A3, all the different,
Mhm.
levels of each letter, there's still a sense that you feel, like I was saying earlier, that you're not giving your 100 to anything, you know. And so I think just kind of feeling a sense of, yes, you have joy in motherhood, but just feeling this sense of worry, like, oh, did I do this right? Am I doing it right? And I think that's a common question that happens, even if you had, whatever plan. So let's say, for example, you plan to have like a vaginal birth and then you ended up having an unexpected C-section. That's
Mhm.
immediate guilt right there. That happened to me. And it's just like, oh, like I failed. I wasn't able to do labor.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
so it comes up.
So that's mom guilt too, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. So it just comes up, and I feel like it hits you in different stages
Mm.
even once you pass new motherhood, when you're even seasoned, you might have guilt over, oh, did I give the right advice to
Mhm.
adult child,
Mm.
to my teenager, or what have you. There's always, I think, a sense in motherhood where you just feel like you need to be doing more.
And how can you do more than what motherhood requires? I mean, it's just we hold such a high bar for ourselves, and I think society, because society is such a worker bee society, at least specifically the U.S. society, that's kind of like you can always do more, raise the bar even higher, and we're always kind of forced to try to meet these at levels of expectation that are somewhat unrealistic, and the work culture is such a work horse culture where people get rewarded for working extensive, like unreasonable amount of time, but don't get like people don't really get rewarded for self-care, for personal development. But you get rewarded for productivity and all those other measures. So I do think also society plays into the pressures of motherhood and plays into amplifying those mom guilt feelings, just because of how our society is toxic. It's a toxic culture. So how do you know? Because like everything, it becomes a spectrum, right? So I may have a little bit of mom guilt here, a little bit of mom guilt there. But what are the signs when it's more than just mom guilt? Like when we're dealing with something that's really severe, what are some red flags would you say for women to kind of look out for if you may not be just dealing with mom guilt, but it may be a little bit of depression, a little bit of anxiety, a little bit of this, a little bit of that, or it's your mom guilt is kind of amplifying and it's exacerbating and it's kind of growing. um like what are some signs that moms should look for, some warning signs?
So, I mean, if you're talking about new motherhood and the distinction between, maybe baby blues and postpartum, if it's lasting more than a couple of weeks, where you're, feeling sadness, anxiety, feeling, fear, stuff like that. For example, like when I had postpartum, I kind of, for some reason, I was just feeling as though, not that something specific was gonna harm my baby, but I just felt like really scared, like scared to even just go pick up my oldest daughter. Like just the drive there was just like so much. And I'm like, okay, yeah, this is not normal. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
but it can be different things. So people don't talk about mom rage, so if there's a lot of you're getting angry a lot, that can be an indication, maybe there's some postpartum anxiety, uh, going on. And then even later stages of motherhood, a lot of times if you're feeling overwhelmed, but you're maybe isolating a lot more than you normally would. Again, the rage perhaps kind of kicking up where you just have like you're short tempered. So there's maybe like normal things that are happening in the household, but you're not able to handle it, So I would just say kind of being curious, how often are you feeling kind of like not like yourself. And it's when you're going, it's hard to kind of explain, I guess, but once
Mhm.
you're going through it, it's like you just know, like, like you'll kind of like reflect, did that reaction warrant what actually happened? You know what I
Mhm.
mean? And
Mhm.
so if stuff like that is happening more often, then I would say try to get some support. Yeah.
How do you ladies deal with like what are some things that you've learned because you've both been moms for some time now. You're quite seasoned in motherhood. So what are some tips for
Not that
women to
season.
just look at your faces like, am I seasoned? By my
Either 8 and 4 or not yet.
I feel like I'm a baby still. Gosh.
Same.
so how do you deal with mom guilt? Like what are some tips that you can share with others to be able to balance some of these thoughts and be able to thrive even through mom guilt? Because it sounds like mom guilt never ends. At least it doesn't sound like it. Um, how do you thrive even with experiencing mom guilt? They're like, well, let me think about this for a second. Am I thriving?
I will say making the time to participate in things like this is one of the things that I do for me. This is a time my kid knows, and we talk about like the modeling. My kid knows mom is on a call. He doesn't quite know what all the calls are, and half the times he wants to, can I come say hello? No, no, you cannot. But he knows and he understands that this is the time that mom has to do something, and you're not allowed to come to this. So this is like that boundary. You're not allowed to come when I have these particular calls going on. So this is one of the things that I do. Um, but I don't know. I still, you know, there's the lovely shock of the reality. Like I said, you're still gonna have to go to work. You're still gonna have to do the thing. So even though he's coming and he's piling on that guilt, I don't want you to go to work. I want you to stay home. And I'm just like, yeah, yeah, me too, buddy. I would love that, but mom's gonna have to go to work and pay the bills. So like, let me go do that. Um, I think it's remembering that I still have to live. Like, I give to him and I give to him. And there's going to be a point in time where, yeah, that's enough because I still have to live. No, I'm not going out and partying and club. No, but I still have to live. So the simple things of, I'm going to watch a show late at night when you're asleep, or just something that becomes more for me and not about him, not about my husband, not about anybody else, just me and what I want to do for me. But it's not very frequent, but I still try to get it in every once in a while just to say, okay, I've had some time and I'm good. I'm refreshed to some extent and I'm ready to deal with you guys again.
I like that messaging of a whole you and a developed you and a loved you and a cared for you is better able to give and nurture him. And that's what it sounds like you're sharing is that the more I'm whole, the more I'm cared for, then not only does it help me, but it helps everybody else around me.
Mhm.
What are
Yeah.
your tips, Francia?
Yeah, I agree with that. And oddly enough, I would say that because I didn't have postpartum with my first, but I had it with my second. But I think my second is what catapulted me into trying to push the mom guilt away. Like, so it is important to take care of yourself, because if you're not taking care of, how can you possibly take care of, those that are relying on you, your kids. So anytime I start to, like, if I'm doing something for self-care, or I have to work late or whatever it is, it's like, okay, there's a purpose for this. And I am someone separate other than a mom. I'm still a woman, I'm a worker, I'm all these different things, I'm a wife, and it's important for us to have separate identities outside of motherhood, because, they also are seeing that. They are also seeing what motherhood is, and what, so moms aren't meant to just be over you all the time and just be your only source of care. So, our kids, when they're not with us, they're learning, that, oh, there's other people that are safe that can take care of me, as well, that moms are not the primary and only caretaker. Um, and I think in early stages of motherhood, I really felt like, oh no, I need to, even though I had help, it's like, no, I need to do this. If I don't do it, then, you know, um, maybe they're gonna feel like I don't care, or, whatever it is. But it's so important. And I remember even when I was going to a support group for myself, the leader of that was telling us, oh, they always say you can't pour from an empty cup. But on top of that, even if you're not pouring, your cup has holes in it. So those holes are, okay, you're working. There's all these different things that are happening that are taking out of you. So you literally do have to pour into yourself so that you can, support your child. So I think the more that you do things for yourself and for your family that aren't directly, where, like how you were saying, while I'm working and stuff like that, and I can't be with you at this time, the more you do things like that, the more you still feel guilty, but you feel less guilty because you're kind of it's like repetitive, and you're kind of like, all right, well, it worked out, it was fine, they're okay,
Mhm.
this needs to happen, and sometimes when it's self-care, it's like, okay, I actually feel refreshed now, so now I can play with you or whatever it is, instead of just, oh, let me just be your 24/7, person, because that's a lot. And I don't think we're
Uh,
designed to,
Yeah,
yeah,
no.
like
yeah.
I mean, I would, and actually, like, I was a stay-at-home mom for the first almost 2 years, like
Hmm.
unexpectedly. I didn't think I was gonna quit my job, and I was just like, oh no, like I need to be
Hmm.
all of it, and it was great, but it was also a struggle. So no matter what you do, if you're a stay-at-home mom, part-time, working, full-time, whatever it is, you're gonna feel guilty.
Right, right, right. It sounds like it's a constant evaluation of every single moment, assessing whether or not you feel you're making the right choices. Right. So, Francia, if others want to find out just how you are balancing motherhood, where can they find you?
Oh my goodness. Well, you guys can find me on Instagram, at Grace Lamp Wellness. You can, and then if you go to my Instagram, my link tree is there, so you can find access to my therapy services as well, and then the support gifts that I have for motherhood. So that's probably the best place to find me.
Awesome, awesome. And Dr. Trista, where can they find you as you journey through motherhood and watch some movies?
And watch movies, right? At tristajob.dpt on Instagram.
Awesome. And as always, I'm Dr. T, the hand behind the handle of healthybump.club. We thank you for joining us this evening. We want to know, what are your thoughts about mom guilt? Is it societal? Oh, is it eternal? Did you experience mom guilt? We want to know. So make sure you drop a comment below and don't forget to like and share. And you know what? I think we may know some moms who can use some support gifts. What do y'all think? I think we may have to tap into some Grace Lamp Wellness. What do y'all think? So we will be having a raffle or giveaway with some items from Grace Lamp Wellness so that we're surprising Francia on the spot.
That's fine. That's fine with me.
So that you could be free, or at least a little bit free from your mom guilt. Okay.
Learn to manage it.
Oh, exactly. So make sure you follow us on our Instagram handle at healthybump.club. Francia brought up the perspective of generational habits and generational impact. So why not go back and watch our video where we talk about breaking those generational issues that we experience. And when you're done there, there's a whole lot of other, we talked about trust and building trust with other individuals. Like Francine done tapped on a whole lot of topics. So go back and watch some of our other videos right here in Healthy Bump Club on YouTube. And when you're done with that, don't forget we are partners with Apple Music. So when you're trying to dance it out and enjoy your mom time by yourself, make sure you hit up our Apple link below. And when you're done there, if you want to rock our gear, why not? Okay, treat yourself. Okay. We talked about mom care. Treat yourself and hit us up and make sure you rock our gear. So, ladies, it was a pleasure talking to you about this topic. I feel like even as a non-mom, but as a village person, I have a better insight as to what moms experience and can better be a part of a mom support system. So I say for the holiday coming up, why not be a part of somebody's village, right? And support them for their Mother's Day. Help them to be a little bit freer from this mom guilt. So On that note, happy Mother's Day to our moms on the panel. Have a wonderful Mother's Day. We thank you for spending part of your Mother's Day weekend with us at Healthy Bump Club, and we'll see you guys when next episode. And